Hey, welcome back to part two of our Your Leo Nation podcast with my brother Danny. And Danny, go ahead and continue. It's been a lot of fun. I want to hear more. I'm going to bring you back. Actually, I'm going to drug you and force you to come back. I want to talk about that, and that could be a whole show itself. But about your experience. But I'm going to just touch on a little bit. So my brother right here, he was actually an All-American football player in college, and he actually played for Jack Elway, John Elway's father, at Cal State Northridge, when they still had a football program. They don't have it anymore. We can talk about why they don't have it anymore. But fascinating story, fascinating athletic career. We both had very successful athletic careers in different arenas, but we'll talk about that later on. But fast forwarding a little bit to contemporary days and how all this relates, and how do we actually save lives as a society? What are the things that we can do? Well, we talked about our mom who used to beat the hell out of us when we got out of line. That type of discipline, that type of attention to detail, it certainly kept us out of jail, and it very well may have kept us out of an early grave, that behavior. We don't see enough of that anymore. And instead of taking responsibility, individuals and groups and advocacy groups are blaming other entities, primarily cops and government, about why so many people of a certain race are dying. But just recently we got through Memorial Day weekend, and as an example, I think in Chicago, there were about 40 people shot. I think 10 died. Three people were shot, Danny. 3 people were shot in one place, standing on a sidewalk, a drive-by shooting. 3 people were shot. Another dead body was found. I don't know what the cause of death was. That was found 2 blocks from the new mayor's house. Another dead body in Chicago over Memorial Day weekend. Now, these are real lives, almost all of them in Chicago, and most of the other large metropolitan areas, urban areas, are young black men who are dead. They're not coming back from Jack in the Box. They're not coming back from running that stop sign. They're not coming back to their mom and or dad. They're dead forever. And they're almost all killed by other young black men. It's a horrible reality. And as 2 black men, it's not fun to say this, but the point is how do we reduce this horrible evil where that black people are killing black people at a rate that is absolutely, literally sinful and disgusting. It goes back to self-policing by taking care of yourself first, taking care of your kids first. When I say taking care of, in other words, keeping yourself, keeping your kids in line. And here I am, 60 years old. Actually, next week I'll be 60 years old. And I have a 9-year-old son, and we don't beat him like mom does. But my wife and I, similar to our mom, Danny, that we serve up immediate consequences for disobedience. Now, again, are they terribly harsh, whatever? But he loses something. He loses the ability to watch this. He loses the ability to do that. He loses the ability to go there. He loses freedom. He loses something. There is some type of punishment dished out when he doesn't follow the rules. And I must say, I'm very happy that even at 9 years old, he's starting to get it. He understands, and he understands why we do it, and we tell him why we do it. But you touched on a really good point earlier about our parents being part of the greatest generation, having perspective and understanding what's really important. Are the external forces important, or is your own behavior important? Which one's more important? Both are important. So I look at that and I think about these district attorneys across the state, across the country, that are working so hard to keep criminals on the street, and they're keeping criminals on the streets in their own communities. In other words, when you release a criminal in downtown Los Angeles, it's not going to have an effect on anybody in
Right.
Brentwood.
Right.
It's not going to have an effect on most people in Chino
Right.
Hills where you
Right.
live. It's not going to have an effect on people living in the wine country up in
Right.
Northern
Right.
California. It's going to have an effect on the community from which they came.
Right.
And it's sad. And it's sad that people don't have enough courage to stand up and say, hey, look, let's all admit what the problem is. It's about people following the rules. And now I'm getting on a soapbox here. But again, having more perspective than I do, because you were in law enforcement for a few years and you were an LA City firefighter for 30
years.
30 years.
30 years.
LA City Fire. And a paramedic for the last,
Right.
what?
Almost 30 years too.
Almost 30
Right.
years, yeah. So, what's your take on that, about Danny, about where you and I came from, where our generation came from, where we're going?
Mark, once again, it's a good question because it's, I guess you can say it's kind of a perplexing question because, I really don't want to, once again, I'm trying not to get into a political talk here, but, and I'm trying to, say this, in the right way, but to me, liberal way of thinking is an issue, because I think that a liberal way of thinking is like, if we just don't do anything, or if we pat them on the head enough times, they'll eventually come around and they will obey. And to me, that's what I'm trying to say is, when I came up, even when you came up, I know when I came up in elementary school, for instance, now I went to elementary school where we had Black teachers and we had white teachers, but we had a lot of Black teachers. And one thing that they used in the classroom, they used corporal punishment.
Mm-hmm.
I had my second grade teacher, and I don't know if I can use names on here or not, but I'll never forget her. I think that she was doing the war. She was in the military. I think she was a sergeant, and I think that's what Mom told me.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know where I got that from, but either way, if she wasn't, she should have been.
Hey, by the way, I think the statute of limitations is over. Was it Mrs. Green?
No, it was Effie Carey.
Effie Carey. I remember. I remember
Mrs. Green had her issues too. Okay. And the reason why, Mark, I know all these names was because I was their nemesis. I encountered them and I tested them all the time.
Mm-hmm.
And now, Effie Carey in the second grade, she ran a high achieving classroom. How I got in there with brain cells of a cantaloupe, I have no idea. But somehow only because I could read, I could write, and I can spell very well. And so I wound up in this class. And I remember that. Now, I'm not advocating, or I'm not supporting or saying that this was the right way to, she was in my opinion, she was a very sadistic, evil teacher. But the one thing that she made you do was to pay attention and to achieve. Because in order to avoid the beatings that she gave you, and she gave you beatings, and I was like one of her main targets because I always challenged her. And but in order to avoid that, you had to come to class prepared. That was one of the rare times in my life, through all high school and college and getting my degree and everything else, that I actually really paid attention. Okay. And, but because she was just so sadistic in how she taught,